Subscribe to the Hit That Line Podcast Network, brought to you by Breeden RV Center. Breeden RV Center, family owned and operated, a no-pressure, laid-back atmosphere, and always home of the free maintenance for life.
This is Trusting the Process, presented by the Arnold team with Weichert Realtors in Harrison.
No matter what the stats may say, and the experts may think, and the commentators may have predicted, when the race is on, all bets are off. Don't be surprised if somebody decides to flip the script and take a pass on yelling uncle. And then suddenly, as the old saying goes, we got ourselves a game.
This is Trusting the Process.
Another edition of Trusting the Process. This one is Season 1, Episode 12, and I'm happy to be joined by Randy Rainwater, 103.7 The Buzz here. Randy, there's a lot that we want to get into, sports radio, personal life, but tell me about what sparked the beard, man. I know you haven't shaved since COVID. What's the reason, man? Why'd you grow it out?
Tye, this is kind of a individual protest to COVID and the inability to function as normal when basically life shut down. Then I thought, well, I'm kind of like a survivalist because I can't go anywhere, can't do anything. My studio for my show is at my home, so I didn't have to go anywhere in order to work unless it was a remote. So it just kind of started off as a joke, and of course, many times my wife has threatened to leave me if I don't at least clean it up. But I've done nothing to it since March when the SEC basketball tournament was shut down. That was the official ending of keeping things trimmed. I actually have hair back on top of my head, even though there's quite a few bald spots, but I haven't had my hair trimmed nor my beard trimmed since, I guess, March 13th. So it's my own personal protest, and until this pandemic is officially over, and I mean over, herd whatever it's called. Immunity, yeah. Immunity, then it will remain. And if it ends up somewhere near my waist, then so be it. But I don't think it'll reach that length. But
let's hope not.
It's kind of funny. On the other hand, my son-in-law, proposed to his fiancée just after Christmas.
Okay.
And we went to Harding University, the campus. They have a beautiful light display, and that's where he proposed to her. And while we were waiting for, I guess you can say, the ceremony, so to speak, a young child who probably was 5 or 6 years old thought I was Santa Claus. And so I took a picture with the child, and I had on my Christmas sweater, so I was quite fitting. But it's been kind of humorous because I've been called Santa Claus by quite a few people, but I don't know that I totally resemble Santa Claus.
Yeah, you're too skinny. You're too skinny to be Santa Claus, Randy.
Well, I hope I am, at least in that regard. But it's been kind of fun. I've received a ton of feedback on it, and when people have seen me on Zoom, particularly on whether it's Eric Musselman's press conference or Zoom conference or whatever it may be, I've had quite a few comments from the media about my beard. So it is, and it is like Santa Claus in one regard. It is white. There's no gray in it. It's white.
There you go. Randy, you brought up your wife, Carrie. I always am curious to talk about the significant others. How long have you been married, and where did you guys meet?
16 years ago, and I was taken to her business, and it was a client visit, and this at the time, She was the marketing director for First Security Bank, and that's how we initially met. And I sat back, and the account executive did all the talking. I did little or no talking, but I guess it was love at first sight on my part, because eventually, obviously, we became engaged and then married. But that was strictly, I guess you can say, by fate. And as it turned out, she's been my soulmate now for the last 16 years.
That's awesome. Who was it? Shap, who'd you go with on that first visit?
Ralph the sales weasel and Ralph Schuster.
Okay.
And Ralph has several clients here in Searcy. Double B's his home office is here in Searcy. Rod Out Lumber is based out of Searcy. At one time, I had, I think, maybe 4 or 5 different clients on the air from Searcy. So, but she eventually became my home, and so happy for that.
So I do want to talk about where you grew up, which is Rose City, right outside of North Little Rock, and you talking about Searcy. It's funny, Randy, my grandmother and grandpa lived in Searcy for a time, so I was there a lot of summers and a lot of times. So I do want to discuss that as well. But I'm curious your pitch. It's always funny to hear sports radio and more guys than anything talk about their wives. You have to have, as a sports radio guy, which you've gotten in 30 years at the Buzz in the business, a personality about you that you can convince people of your opinion of this, of that. How did you convince Carrie to go on a date with you and then ultimately marry you, Randy?
It wasn't easy. I do believe most couples have to have some kind of bond, and it may not be as evident in the beginning, but thankfully for me, a huge bond that was between us was sports. Carrie has 4 boys, and all 4 were athletes in different sports. Some played multiple sports. Obviously, my background has always been sports. And I was asked to speak at I call them the rubber chicken meetings, where you go to a Rotary or Kiwanis, whatever it may be. Well, I was invited by Carrie to come speak to the Rotary Club, which ironically was on the Harding University campus. And after the meeting was over, we stood in the parking lot, even though I had to be on the air at 4 o'clock. And at this time, I was working out of the studio in Little Rock. Mm-hmm. I think we stood in the parking lot and talked for over an hour. And it was about sports and obviously her kids. And immediately that bond was formed right there. And consequently, Jared, which is the oldest, at that time was playing for Harding Academy. And after we married, he went back to Searcy High School. Derek was playing golf and baseball. Flav was playing baseball, football. And Reed at that time was the youngest, was simply playing baseball. And or at that age, he was playing t-ball. And it immediately, again, that bond was formed, and obviously it progressed beyond that to where we dated and then consequently got married. I will give you this interesting tidbit, Ty, for what it's worth. We were going to marry on a Saturday on the way to a Arkansas football game, which I was to cover.
No way.
And we did a post-game show afterwards. I had a van that had been given to me, or loaned to me, I should say, by a dealership here in Searcy, which is no longer in business, but that doesn't matter. But so we were driving. We're on Interstate 40. Is it 40, 30? I can't keep up with them. 40. And we got just outside of Ozark, and I thought we could stop at that roadside park, and we got a little caravan behind us. And we pulled into this little cove, so to speak, and it overlooks, it would have been a beautiful view. But on the picnic table, a mother was changing a child, changing a diaper. Carrie immediately said, "We are not stopping here." Okay. So we go on. Nothing else is evident of a good spot to stop. So we get off at Alma. Now we're headed towards Fayetteville on Alma, on the Alma Highway. We drive and drive and drive, and there's nothing. Nothing. Finally, this park shows up. So we turn off the road into this park, drive until it almost takes us into the lake, and we end up marrying just outside the ranger's office, and I'm standing on a drainage grid, and the preacher out in the middle of these woods, and our little entourage all gathered around, and that's where we consummated our marriage. But anyway, Wadsworth.
You might have the coolest, down-to-earth, chill wife that I've ever met from the optics of the stories that you just told me. And I want to go. I want to go to where it all began in just a sec. But you mentioned your 4 stepsons, Randy. I'm a part of a blended family. I know that can be difficult. 1, were you married before Carrie? And 2, how difficult was it to immerse yourselves into her son's lives? Because I know it took a while for me to acclimate to my stepmom, who I love, and my stepsisters, who I love to this day. But there's a trial and error period there, and I'm wondering if you experienced the same thing I did from a father perspective.
I think because sports, football, baseball, loved golf, I used to take, back when I was able to play, I would take Derek, who developed into a very good golfer, still is a very good golfer. I would take him at the tender age of 14 and 15, and often Trey Schaff we'd form a 3-man team, and I would go all the way from Hazen to Marlton to you name it. I would take Derek out, and he would be part of our team. And in fact, we played a 3-man scramble at Searcy Country Club, Trey, Schaff, myself, and Derek. And sports was such an easy bridge to build the relationships. The only bridge that I had to build in particular with Jared, he was the oldest, and he was maybe so protective of his mother. He just didn't want his mother to get hurt. And I had to earn his trust that I was there for not only her, but for the entire family. And I would do my very best to take care of our family and not let any harm possibly come if I could prevent it. Mm-hmm. But Derek was easy to win over. Flav was easy to win over. Reed was easy to win over. And now I consider Jared, again, as if he's my own son. And I think he treats me the same way as if I'm his actual dad. So we did maintain the posture, since these were not my biological children, mm-hmm. that they would call me Randy. They wouldn't call me Dad, and that's fine. That's still reserved for their fathers who are still living. So, but I am their stepdad, and I will get cards from them, and it will say Randy, but it's also accompanied with love. So
that's awesome.
I think I've gained their trust and their love. And I know with Reed in particular, who is now 18, we have traveled the United States, not all 50 states, obviously, but we have traveled. He has played showcase baseball, travel baseball, ever since he's been 6 years old. And I would love to have even a fraction of the money that we have invested, spent, but I would not. I'll do the same thing all over again. And with Reed, I have a very special bond. And I've been in the media type for so long. Mm-hmm. I get accused often at the games because I don't cheer. And as you well know, we are threatened with our life and limb if we.
We'll throw you out of the
utter a
Orville
word
Henry press box if you cheer.
I mean, you better get your rear in the seat, and that's the first announcement that they make.
Yeah.
And so I have consequently, I'm that knucklehead who's got a camera. I'm going to make sure I've got the video. I've got my little radar gun. I've got my little charts, and I immerse myself in that. And it means nothing to nobody, including probably to myself. But it's just a way that I've immersed myself and enjoyed following the teams that Reed's played on. And but it's been a blast these last 12 years. Hard to believe it's over after this high school baseball season.
I think it also helps, Randy, that you're the cool stepdad, the sports radio guy, the sports guy. That definitely helped. I think it helped you, especially with their mom being such a sports fan with them. But I do want to touch back in town at your early life. I know Carrie's been a huge part of your life, not just for the past 16 years of marriage, but prior to that. But let's go way back, man. Let's go back to Rose City in North Little Rock. You grew up playing baseball. You ended up going to Euler playing baseball there. If I walked into the hallways of Randy Rainwater's high school, what kind of guy am I meeting? Was he a troublemaker, a good kid, straight and narrow? What kind of guy was Randy Rainwater in high school?
I would probably say laid back. Even back then, I mean, you had the what we call the greasers. You had the preppies. My senior year in 1969, we actually one day a week would get away from the slacks, the starch shirts, the monogram sweaters, and we'd wear jeans. And that was kind of breaking of the mold. But I ran track. I was trying to play basketball until I realized there was several guys that were a lot better than I was, and that seat on the sidelines didn't feel too good. And played football up until my senior year, and I was afraid I would get hurt and lose my scholarship to Euler, so I backed off of playing football. And that, ironically, was the first year that Mike Malham Sr., who had left Catholic to come to McClellan, was our coach. And we had zero success up until Coach Malham, and they ended up being a very successful program. But, I don't know. I never ran for office. I never class president or anything like that, so I never tested my so-called popularity. But I think I just blended in.
Nothing wrong with that.
I know that I tried skipping out to leave school early and got caught, and Mr. Hogan laid the law to me along with my other two buddies at the Board of Education, and that probably was about as reckless as I was. I didn't go. I mean, I didn't have perfect attendance or anything like that, but I was a B student, middle average, I guess you can say, but loved history. Still do love history. That was probably my favorite subject, and didn't like math. And it's obvious if you look at some of my equations, I can't hardly add 2 and 2 together. But it really was, I was the first class of the new McClellan High School. Mableville was the previous high school, then McClellan was built, and I was the first class to go through it.
How about that?
From 1966 through 1969. First graduating class that went through all 3 years at McClellan High School.
So I brought up Mrs. Carey. Randy, what were your parents' names? What were they like growing up? And just kind of what did your home situation look like?
Well, if I tell you my parents' names and then I tell you what my father did, you're going to form an immediate image, and I probably did fulfill that. My father's name was Jack. My mother's name was Grace, and he was a Baptist minister. And you know about preachers' kids. So now, as a young child, I was very mischievous, and maybe I outgrew it once I finally got, or maybe I matured. Maybe that's the better word.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved it when there was going to be a baptism, because I would slip into the church. We lived right behind the church. I slipped in behind the inside the church, and I'd go swim in the baptistry. And my father didn't really like that, but he didn't catch me either. So
you got away with it.
Yeah. Maybe I didn't, but he just didn't, punish me for it. But just a typical childhood. Had a great neighborhood across the street from the parsonage. There was a house that was always for rent, and it seemed like there was the Sebo twins, the Duke twins, and then there was another set of twins that I can't remember their name now. And then off to my right, so to speak, there were a set of brothers. Their father owned Young's Fish Market. Philip and Virgil. Virgil was in my class, so we were the same age, and Philip was like a couple of years younger. So we always had a ball game of some sort going. Whether my dad did put up a basketball goal on the fire escape behind the church, and then they asphalted the parking lot. So we had a football field, we had a basketball, we played baseball. I guess the only other thing that was kind of devious is the house was not underpinned. So if the ball was hit underneath the house, obviously whoever hit it had to go get it. And if it went into certain areas, you had to replace it. So that was, and then there was, back when there was the old gas lamps, somehow, some way, even though it maybe was a 6-inch pane of glass, somehow a line drive found its way through the glass, so they had to be replaced. But it was just a wonderful childhood at night. You may not have ever heard of this game, kick the can, and all kinds of different. I mean, we played
stickball.
We played until our parents made us come in. And at age 12, they built a new parsonage, and it was basically on the other side of Rose City, out near Lynch Drive Elementary School. And it kind of broke up the band, so to speak. But some great memories back of my childhood there in dear old Dogtown, Rose City.
Randy, you mentioned your dad, Jack, being a Baptist preacher, and you're in a pulpit of sorts. I'm in a pulpit of sorts talking to sports radio. Now, we're not spreading the gospel. We're not talking about our relationship with God or anything like that, but we are in an area where we do reach a lot of people. Randy, at any point, did you think you were going to follow in your father's footsteps and be in the church, or did you feel like that was never a destination for yourself?
No, I never. A lot of times that is the case, where a child who grows up in the church, in this case, particularly a male, because it hadn't been until I'm not sure how long that women have been incorporated into the ministry. But no, it never really crossed my mind. That was the only thing that I really wanted to do, and I couldn't carry a tune in the bucket, is I wanted to sing. And but I never had the talent for that, so that was one of those situations where you just accept it as it is and you go on. But no, I never. The only calling time that I ever really felt was I wanted to talk, and I did enjoy, even at a young age, getting up in front of people and talking, and I'm thinking a lot of that obviously was predicated because I was in the church, and whether it's in Sunday school or whatever it may be, I never was afraid to talk. So that probably helped me later on in life, obviously, going into the business of talk radio, that I wasn't afraid to talk.
I've heard you tell the story before about kind of the first time you started talking. If I remember correctly, early 80s, local broadcast, Cabot High School. What was that first experience in a talking format, in a broadcasting format like for you? And do you still have that tape today, Randy?
I don't know if I do or not. The way that I got into broadcasting was a dear friend, Ed Hoyt, who's a State Farm agent in North Little Rock. He called me and said, I want you to meet me at Cabot's Gymnasium. We're going to broadcast the Lone Oak Cabot basketball game. And I said, we have a radio station. He said, yeah, we do. AM 1350 KBOT. And like any knucklehead, sure, I'll do it. And there was actually three of us. Well, by the end of the first half of the girls' game, we'd already pushed the other guy out, and Ed and I was doing it ourselves. Now, this was all taped. And the next thing I know, I'm doing the homecoming parade, the Christmas parade. My first remote was across the street from the radio station at then Kmart. And it just kind of grew from there. I mean, we broadcast Pee Wee basketball games. And I fell in love with it. And needless to say, in 82, Ed and I started doing the Cabot High School football games. Mm-hmm. Then that bled into the Cabot basketball games. Then that led into Cabot baseball games. And in 83, because Ed's son, Eddie, was a starting quarterback, he didn't want to be on the air. And that turned into be a magical year in that Cabot went on to win the state football championship, defeating Rivercrest. And my actual color analyst was Joe Slayton, who at that time worked for Alltel. Joe had played football at Arkansas State. So he had a vast knowledge of the game, which is an understatement. At that time, as Cabot kept on winning, the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette had two different papers. There was the statewide paper, then there was the city edition. And because we were getting, Cabot was getting the statewide, a lot of times Cabot wouldn't have any kind of write-ups in the paper. And needless to say, the natives of Cabot were very upset. You'd have to drive to Jacksonville to get the city paper. And before the broadcast, that state championship game, Wally Hall came walking into our booth, and he wanted to come on the air and apologize to the Cabot folks and promise them they would be getting full-blown coverage in the so-called statewide paper. And Wally ended up staying for the entire broadcast. And I don't know that Wally has ever done a game since or before. But that was such a neat experience because, again, these were on tape. And if I wanted to have an hour pregame, I had an hour pregame. If I wanted an hour postgame, then I had an hour postgame. And we immediately took the recorder, the microphone, headed down to the locker room. I think we interviewed everybody, including the water boy, but after that championship game. But that was my springboard into calling games. And then my springboard into talk radio was Ed Hoyt again. Ed had started a, quote, talk show, 9 o'clock on Saturday mornings, and it was an hour's length. Well, he came to me and said, come on and help me. Okay. Well, after about a couple of weeks, they said, I don't want to do this anymore. You can have it. Well,
little did he know.
Yeah. 1 week after, maybe my mother was the only listener, because I certainly didn't have any phone calls. I said, this is bull. So I turned it into a interview-based program, and my very first interview was Paul Ills. And Paul was so gracious, I went down to the KTV Channel 7 studios, and I've never been around a more gracious individual. Had to know I was nervous as heck, and let me grill him, and thankfully I must have asked enough open-ended questions that he filled up that hour of time. But after that, I wasn't afraid to go interview anybody or ask anybody, especially if they would come to Cabot, do it from the studio. And barely, 2 weeks after U.S. Reed hit that shot against Louisville, I had U.S. Reed on the air.
Oh, wow. Heck yeah.
That's how I met Marcus. Marcus had come to Cabot for some event, and I can't remember what it was, but they're in my little trusty recorder, and I'm interviewing 56, and that's where our initial friendship and bond developed. And needless to say, he's been a friend of mine for now well over 30 years. So some wonderful memories.
Yeah.
Was able to make mistakes and get by with it because, again, nobody's listening. So thankfully, the station, my compensation was what advertising I went out and sold. So I learned how to get in the community and get people involved and spend their good money on, probably worthless programming. But it helped develop me in some of the skills that I would later on need, which I never imagined that I would end up being a talk show host, especially now for 30 years.
Travis and Carolyn Arnold of the Arnold team with Wykert Realtors in Harrison are your go-to real estate agents in the North Central Arkansas area. From Eureka Springs to Mountain Home, from the Missouri line down to Jasper and the Buffalo River area, these hardworking agents are ready to help you find the perfect property. Call or text them at 870-715-2404 and let Travis and Carolyn go work for you.
Screw them. This is your time. Now go out there and take it.
You're listening to Trusting the Process.
That's an area I want to go into next. This is Trusting the Process, Season 1, Episode 12. We're talking with Randy Rainwater, 1037 The Buzz. And it's funny you mentioned the marketing and selling side of this industry, Randy, because I was talking pretty extensively with my sports journalism professor yesterday, my favorite one, Professor Ricky Thine, and I told him, who's at the University of Arkansas, by the way, I was like, me, you, and Professor Foley need to sit down and somehow, some way get the selling aspect of our business in the curriculum, because I didn't learn a thing on that when I was in college from our journalism department, and that's really helped me grow connections, grow clients, grow my business network, and it seems like that's where you really got your start. How important, how integral was that to your career to develop relationships early on that have been with you to this day?
I don't want to sound trite, but it's everything. When you meet with, whether it's such as we're talking now, we're forming some type of relationship. We may not think of it as we're talking right now, but we are. Mm-hmm. Same thing with a client. When you meet with a client, you've got to earn their trust, but you've also got to lead them to believe, and hopefully you're telling the truth in that regard, but you're trying to help their business. You want their business to be successful so that you can be successful. And earning that trust is not easy, because anytime I think you're reaching for someone's back pocket, they probably got one hand over it trying to guard you from getting into that back pocket. But it's all about trust. It's all about relationships. I could go to First Security Bank right now, walk in to the main branch, and I could talk to Randy Rutledge, which is the president of all 78 First Security banking centers across this state, over $5 billion in assets. And we would sit down. In fact, I went into the bank one day. This is when Randy was on the board of trustees.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget what was going on, but there was a coach search. And I walked into his office, and he held up his hand, his palm towards me, and he said, "I know nothing." I said, "Randy, I wasn't coming here to talk to you about that." He said, "Right." Steve Lytle, who is the owner of Double B's, I could go into Steve's office. Now, I don't do any marketing, by the way, for 1037. No, zero. I haven't done marketing in right at 30 years. But I could walk into Steve's office and sit down and chew the fat, and he probably has Gracie, who is a rescue, and she goes to work with him every day. And we first had Gracie. She was a beautiful dog. And or I could go to Rideout Lumber and sit down with Ross Rideout. And but I built relationships with them. I played golf with all these guys. So they're friends. I can't say they're my associates, because again, I'm not their marketing rep.
Mm-hmm.
But if they ever ask me something about should they invest in something as an element, I'll give them an honest opinion. And Double B's, same thing with Sonic. Greg Rowden or Gene Morris, any of those guys, I could go sit down with them, and whether it's at lunch or just visiting. And I used to kind of make I don't know what you call it, a tour, if you will. And I got to the point where I felt like I was intruding, though, on the other hand, where, they're there to work, and I'm in there to chew the fat, and I don't want to put them into a situation where they almost want to say, "Can you get out of here so I can get some work done?" So I've kind of limited that over the last several years. But anytime I go in the bank, if Randy's in his office, I'll go and stop, and we'll talk for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And once in a while, I will stop by Steve's office at Double B's. I don't get out to Ross's much, because they end up selling to a company out of Missouri. So I don't feel as comfortable walking in there now, because it's not owned by the Rideout family.
Yeah.
But it's about building relationships, Tye, and earning their trust, and showing them that you're genuine in your relationships with them, and it's not all just about what's in their back pocket that's important to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to put it. And I get a call from a college kid or someone that's looking to get into the industry probably once a month, Randy, and I tell them the exact same thing you told me. It's about relationships. And you mentioned the friendship aspect of yours. Mine's the same way. The clients that we have here that I've helped bring on here at ESPN Arkansas, hitthatline.com, they're my friends first. And I want to make sure, like you mentioned, they're getting a good product, they're getting what they're paying for, because the last thing I want is to lose a friendship over something that I may have broke their trust. And that's a hard part to justify sometimes, but it's definitely worth it in the long run. And you're talking about just you being more on air now. I want to get into you at Drive Time, and that's a show that I grew up. One of the things, Randy, before we kind of get to the origin of it, one of the things I always appreciated about you is when I called into the show as a dumb middle school or high school kid and probably sounded like an ignorant idiot, and I couldn't string a sentence together because I was so nervous to talk to you over the air. You were never mean. You were never rude. You and Rick always took my call, and it was the world to me. And I would wait an hour to get in with you guys because that's how much I appreciated your programming. How, like, you'll have some idiot callers on a daily basis. We have some idiot callers on a daily basis, and they try my patience. How have you been patient so many times over the years with just some morons that occasionally call into your show, man?
I don't really tune them out, but let me just say I probably let them ramble too much.
Probably let me ramble too much, to be honest, back in the day.
When you're probably talking 30 years of doing this now, you think you learn by this point in time how to move on from those kind of callers. But I try not to let it either affect me personally, and there can be some personal attacks. Very few will come at you directly. Obviously, with so much social media we have today, there and these chat boards and all this other stuff, there's other ways they can get at you. But I try not to let that affect me. But I can't explain why I've always had that kind of patience. But I was always taught to be courteous, respectful. I was always taught that everybody has an opinion, even if it doesn't coincide with what I believe, and they are entitled to that opinion, sometimes as radical as it may be. I try not to be over judgmental, even though at times it's easy to make some hard and fast opinions, and sometimes those aren't the most positive opinions.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I'm not afraid of controversy, but I don't see the need for it if it can be avoided. I mean, just to say something, what does that mean? And just like that knucklehead that said that about Eric Musselman and the matchup, Chris Beard would, chew him up and spit him out. I mean, stuff like that. It's not even necessary. And it's not even an informed opinion.
Nope.
Obviously, the guy didn't do his homework or wasn't paying attention to what Eric Musselman has been accomplishing, not only at Arkansas, but back at Nevada. But anyway, I try not to let things get me personal. We're not going to talk about religion. We're not going to talk about politics. We're going to stick to sports. I don't get much into entertainment at all. Again, this sports radio is a form of entertainment, but it's not about TV, and it's not about music, and it's not about culture. So just try to stick to the knitting. And if at times, we get that knucklehead that calls in, then as long as he doesn't say something inflammatory, derogatory, or using profanity or racial slurs, then I'll try to get him off as quickly as possible and move on. But there's always going to be somebody that's going to strike the nerve of somebody else out there. And the way now that I'm getting the feedback that a lot of times I can't read on the air is through our live fan feedback, and we've got a new text element we're adding in. But the ones I can't read, I don't read. And some are not worth reading to begin with. But and callers are inclined to go after callers more than they're inclined to go after Rick or myself, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but they're more inclined to go after each other than they are towards the host of the program.
Fan feedback. I've heard some stuff over the years, and you mentioned not a lot of it gets to you, but when it's irritating, when you're trying to have a good segment, a good sports conversation, and then someone sends in a name that you're reading, they ask what looks to be a good question, but their name is something that shouldn't be said, that you just don't know at the time because you're getting so many texts, so many calls, so many feedbacks. Is that frustrating when you've worked so hard on that particular segment, Trey or Rick, what does that do for you in the midst of a segment when someone sends in something they shouldn't on the fan feedback?
Again, you try to ignore it. You hopefully it doesn't, quote, throw you off your game. You know this as well as I do. If you can't multitask, you won't survive.
Yep.
And, your email, you're getting email, you're getting live fan feedback. Now you're getting these texts. I'll even get texts on my phone from friends that are chiming into something. There is a very influential gentleman in Little Rock who has my number. We've been friends for a long time. In fact, he played baseball for the University of Arkansas. And if someone's on there blasting the Arkansas program, he'll fire me a text, "Get that idiot off there," something like that.
Yeah.
Well, you look at it and you're trying not to let it break your line of concentration that you have with the caller, but or with the subject matter. But I learned a long time ago, if you can't multitask, you're going to get swallowed up and spit back out, because sometimes the information can come in quite faster than the mind can absorb and still maintain the level of concentration that you have on the other end. Rick and I have been together for about 18 years, and we have developed, we had to, obviously, he's from Springdale, I'm from Little Rock, or now Searcy, so we rarely do the show together. So I just let it happen. But generally speaking, when you hear a response, it's Rick that's going to respond first. And occasionally, well, more than occasionally, I'll speak first. But it has helped in some regards when I'm multitasking. If I do let my mind stray just a little bit, that Rick is right there. He's hearing every word. He jumps in, and I pretty well know the gist of what's going to be said, but it gives me a time to not only collect my thoughts from what I was reading or even what I was listening to, and that has been, I can't tell you, Tye, how beneficial that's been for all these years.
How long did it take to develop that rapport, Randy? Because y'all started together in 2003. How long did it take before you felt like you were really gelling as a unit on drive time?
It's funny. I thought we gelled almost immediately. And I think part of it was, again, back to, I say aloud, but he'll speak first, and it's easier for me once he stops. Now, we're bad. Both of us are bad at interrupting each other often. But generally speaking, I felt like for the flow of the program, you can't have both of us talking at the same time, obviously. So without having eye contact, it was just easier for him, if he chose to answer first, or if not, I'll take the lead, so to speak. But Rick is so easy to talk to. I think being a sports information director for those 25 or so years, he had to develop the ability not only to listen, but when to talk. And working with head coaches as he did, you have to learn to work with them to form that bond with those head coaches. So it made it quite simple to me, I thought. And both of us have I don't know if it's a sense or not, but you seem to feel the emotion or the tone of voice, what direction that the conversation, how it's going to flow. So I felt good from the very beginning when Philip Johnson, the owner of Signal Media, when actually I had David Basil before Rick. And Philip came to me and said, I need David to step in on the morning show, and we need to bring stability there. And who would you like as a co-host? It didn't take me 2 seconds to say Rick Schafer. And
I've
told
never
him
heard
why.
that story. That's awesome.
Yeah, told him why. And I said, we need somebody in Fayetteville. I either need to move to Fayetteville or we need somebody from Fayetteville. We need somebody who in either a second's time can be on campus, or if there's a press conference, whatever it may be, we need a presence there in Fayetteville. And I said, top it off, this is a guy that was the sports information director for the University of Arkansas for over 25 years. So what's a better source? And who knows the history of Arkansas better than Rick Schafer? And that's how it all came about with Rick. And I forget who the hire was, but I was in Fayetteville for the announcement of the new basketball coach. And Rick came on with me that day for the entire program. And this was before we consummated the deal for him to be my regular co-host. And I'd interviewed him before, but not in the context that he was that day, as more or less being a partner. And it just flowed so well, and Rick was so well received that, again, when it came to pass that David was moving to the morning, if I could get, I didn't work on the compensation package for Rick. I have no idea what we are paying him, but I felt like if he and Philip could come to an agreement on a financial package, then in my opinion, it was a done deal.
Real quick before we move on to Basil, because he's been a big influence in my sports radio life, I went to coffee with Rick as a true freshman on Dixon Street, Randy, and he was as kind, as gracious. You talked about Paul Eels earlier. He was as kind as gracious as him. We talked for 30 minutes to an hour, and he shared some insights with me that I still have to this day. So I can only imagine if he was willing to do that for me, what he's been for you over the years. But with David, the Basil, whatever, David is as genuine as a human being as there is in Arkansas sports media. I know he has his persona. I know he has his perception. But I remember a conversation that we had my junior year of college, and he knew who I was from sports media, being from Little Rock. Us kind of building a relationship. We're sitting outside of Paul Feinbaum's set because he's about to go on. And he looks me straight in the eye and goes, what do you want to have to do after college? And you know how some guys are just like nonchalant. They'll just say stuff to strike conversation. He was seriously not concerned, but genuinely interested in mine. And I know we do the same morning show, him 6 to 10, us 6 to 9, but I don't consider him a rivalry whatsoever. I consider him a friend, and I consider him a mentor of sorts. What is your relation? That's kind of, in a nutshell, what my relationship with Baz has been like. What has your relationship been like with David Basil over the years, Randy?
It starts with being a friend. DB and I go back. Actually, my first meeting with David was, I guess it was Arkansas Specialty Orthopedic even back then. Dr. Tucker and David was kind of doing the marketing for Arkansas Specialty. And Jimmy Joe had to eventually work on my shoulder, which was the first of many, but nevertheless, our bond between David and I started right there, and it just grew over the years. And I never dreamed that one day, David would be in the radio business, and especially with us. And then, because David was a little bit of a rolling stone, so to speak. One time he was on Channel 4 as their sports director. And then, he's done so many other little things along the line. And it used to be the running joke, well, David will stay here a couple of years and he'll move on to something else. Well, now it's probably 20 some odd years later, and he's still there at the radio station. But he's a friend. He's a colleague. but I mean, we were going to an Arkansas football media day several years ago, and he was in a Frank Fletcher Charger, and I joke now that the wheels landed down about 35 minutes later from Little Rock to Fayetteville, in about the same amount of time coming back. David, I don't think he knows what the speed limit is, and did the same thing going to Birmingham, to Hoover. But I called him a friend, and we can talk about virtually anything. And I really enjoyed my short time with him as my co-host.
Speaking of co-hosts, is that Cruz in the background, Randy?
Probably, because Cruz is normally in the chair over here, but he left the studio a few moments ago, so I'll shut the door. Maybe that'll help.
No, you're good, buddy. I was just joking.
Oh, no. Oh, there's Cruz behind me. Okay, never mind. I don't know which one that is. We only have 7 dogs, so it can be one of many.
Man.
My wife is into fostering rescues. Every one of our 7 dogs are all rescues, and all have their own individual stories. Got to tell this one real quick about.
Yeah, go ahead.
I hope we're not on the time frame, because I do talk a lot.
You're good, man. I want to make sure you have plenty of time for your show that's in about an hour.
Oh no, I'm not on today. Believe it or not.
Oh, baseball.
Arkansas baseball.
Okay, yeah. Cool.
In fact, I got stat broadcast up right now. I'm getting ready to monitor. Cruz, my wife went. She saw his picture online, and he was at the shelter in Mayflower. A lady had found him in her driveway. He was basically comatose. We believe he survived the tornado that hit in Bologna, and he traveled all the way from Bologna to Mayflower. We have no way to know the truth in that, but he is so well-mannered. Somebody had worked with Cruz, and because of him cruising all the way from, we believe, Bologna to Mayflower, that's how he got the name Cruz.
Okay.
We have another dog named Holly, who was found basically in the front yard of Ross Rideout, and that was Christmas Day, hence Holly. Crosby, there's a road here in Searcy. He was found on Crosby Road. I won't bore you with any more details, but there's all kinds
awesome.
of stories that we have with these dogs. And Cruz is my buddy, and right now he's back in his chair. He's got his chin on the arm of the chair, and it's funny, Tye. I can be downstairs. I'll read not newspaper anymore. I'll read my iPad, and he knows at 1:00 I'm headed upstairs to the studio, and the moment I get up, he automatically takes off, and he's running up the stairs to get inside the office, inside the studio, to get into his chair. He also knows if he barks while I'm on the air, he's going to be put out. So he's learned not to bark as best as possible.
You got a good one, man. With spring and summer rolling in, it's a great time to find your perfect vacation home here in the Ozarks. Whether it's living and fishing on one of our beautiful lakes or canoeing and kayaking on the Buffalo or White Rivers, Carolyn and Travis Arnold of the Arnold team would love to help you find it. Call or text 870-715-2404. And these experienced agents with Weichert Realtors in Harrison will help you find your dream place here in God's country.
Now, what are you going to do?
You're listening to Trusting the Process.
We are going to get into some rapid fire with Randy Rainwater, 1037 The Buzz coming up.
Can I tell one more story?
Yeah, man. The floor is yours.
One more story. Because this is probably as an important of an element of my life in sports radio, particularly with 103.7 The Buzz. I started in 80? Yeah, 80. But I was hired as a marketing rep. And at that time, AM 1010 was the Buzz radio, I don't know what her name was back then. Anyway, we were carrying stock market stuff. Buzz is anyway. And I was selling at that time both of the AM and the FM. Well, I primarily became just the AM guy, and I was the only person selling the AM. But we had one element that would sell, and it was Rush Limbaugh. And I was making a nice living just off of Rush Limbaugh. By the time, I think it was November, I went to Philip and asked him if I could start a Saturday morning talk show and just call it Sports Talk. And he said, sure. Well, it was 1 hour, 11 to 12. And the way that I got people on the air in that program, I would go to their business and I would have a little poster that I put in their window, and I would give them 11 free spots for just having that up. But then after the 11 spots, free spots ran, then I wanted them to sign a contract because hopefully it was being productive for them. And eventually I sold the program at the 1 hour out. Well, at the end of that year, the end of 1980, I get a call from Philip, and he says, I want you to come down to my office, and we're going to meet with John Ramsey, who is the program director. And he said that Ramsey's going to make a recommendation. And I thought, well, what about? And I soon found out that we would not be paying, I think it was $1,000 a month at that time to carry Rush Limbaugh. Not only no, but heck no, we're not going to pay it. Little did we find out that was one of the worst decisions that was ever made. It went to KARN. Needless to say, they made a living off of it for 30 years or so. And it was shortly thereafter Ramsey got fired, and Philip again called me to his office, and he said, do you think you can do this for 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and sell it? I said, absolutely. Well, we got Pete Perkins and David Lanier, who both worked for the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, and I would come on at 5 o'clock. David and Pete did it from 4 to 5, then from 5 to 6, Pete and I did it. And it was maybe 90 days into it when Pete had to make a decision, either full-time with the Democrat-Gazette or full-time with us. And when he went to Philip said, thanks, but no thanks, and said, can you do the program, and can you find someone to help you? I said, of course, absolutely. And that's when I had about 9,000 co-hosts flowing in and out of there. And needless to say, started selling, and I went full-time into programming, and they got a sales force to start selling the AM. And then the interesting part about AM 1010, we, along with a station in Toronto, we were a 25,000 watt AM. They were a 50,000 watt AM. But WINS in New York City wanted to make bids on the Mets, Yankees, you name it, Knicks, but they had to have what was called a clear signal. So they had to buy both AM 1010 in Little Rock, AM 1010 in Toronto, Canada. Now, this would totally blow some people's minds. At that time, we were doing Carlisle High School football, and we were doing Central Arkansas Christian basketball. And finally, Philip let us go live. And instead of being tape delayed, we were live. And our signal, Tye, would bounce all the way into New York City and bounce off of a hotel. That's why they had to buy us, and they had to buy Toronto.
Holy cow.
Can you imagine standing at Times Square and you're listening to Randy Rainwater and Bill Powell calling Central Arkansas Christian basketball? What?
Dude, that's insane.
So, needless to say, it sold, and I'll never forget this day. I'm standing by the water cooler, and Philip he has an attaché in his hand. He's getting ready to walk out the back door. He's going to go purchase for cash 1037, which at that time was rock and roll. And then less than a year after purchasing 1037, we turned it into talk radio. And that is the full circle of not only the beginning of Drive Time Sports, but moving from AM to FM, which definitely was the best thing that ever happened to my program and all of our programming, was to go FM and not be on the AM. Not many people listen to the AM much anymore.
It's definitely gone by
there you go.
It's definitely gone by the wayside. See, you brought up Cersei. I want to ask this question, and then we'll move on to rapid fire and let you go. And again, thank you so much. You talked about Paul being gracious with his time. I mentioned Rick being gracious with his. Randy, I appreciate you spending over an hour with me, because this has been some scintillating conversation. You're in Cersei now, the home studio. I watched that video that Steve Soley did with you. Awesome. Why did you move? Was it Carrie that was in Cersei? And how long have you had that home studio?
This is actually the second home studio. How this came about, I had L5 go bad in my back. And this was the year, and I'm terrible on years, but Bobby Petrino, Cotton Bowl, Kansas State, and my back surgeon, Dr. Bruffett, said he couldn't do the procedure otherwise until January, till I got back from the Cotton Bowl, because if he did it before then, I wouldn't be going to Cotton Bowl. He knew I had to go. Well, I was living on meds even before I made the drive down to Dallas, and lived on meds coming back, and then finally had the procedure in January. And I guess it was back in November, somewhere in there, October, November, I went to Philip and I just said, I can't do this. This drive is killing me, coming to Little Rock. And I proved successfully I could do it from my home, which we took the den and turned it into a little makeshift studio. But I had everything I needed to do the show. I can get on to the log for the station. I can get all the other elements I need. I play my own sound bites. The only thing I can't do is put a caller on hold, but I can take the caller off hold, and then I can dump them. Or that probably sounds bad. But anyway.
That's a phrase. Okay.
But I got back, had the surgery. It was, I guess, going on 60 days, maybe 90 days. I'm still at home. And the station was getting kind of impatient with me to get back to the studio. And I go back for about 3 days, and I'm still suffering from, the road between Cersei and Cabot is horrendous, particularly near Ward and maybe Beebe. coming south. And I talked again with Philip, and he said, let me think about it. Well, they called me into a meeting, and you had the CEO or CFO, you had Justin Acree, Philip. I'm thinking, oh, my gosh, I'm about to get fired. And they laid the proposal out to me that I could do the show from home. And they provide all the elements that I needed necessary, whether it be the tie line, at the time phone line, then now we're doing it by way of the internet. And that's how it all developed from home.
Man.
And Kerry was kind enough to agree to let me dress up, if you will, like a studio. We had an empty room.
Man cave, man.
Upstairs. And, yeah. I've got 3 TVs. I had all 3 of them going Saturday. I had my Todd Jacobian set up with my 2 monitors that had the board, the log, live fan feedback, whatever it may be. Then I got a big monitor that I put the call board on. And I bought a Cradle Point. Probably didn't know this. Very few know this. Last summer, we were in Atlanta, Georgia for Reed's baseball. And we were in an RV park. And the Cradle Point, I picked the dining room in the RV, spread all my equipment out on it. And from 4 o'clock until 7 o'clock, I'm doing Drive Time Sportsman RV in Atlanta, Georgia. And people probably believed I was still back in Little Rock or Searcy. But thank God for technology.
Technology, man. All right, rapid fire time, Randy. We try and do these in 10 seconds or less. I'm going to go through these. Are you still reading over 100 websites a day?
Yes.
What's your favorite sport to watch and cover?
Football.
How often do you make it over the Bulldog and Bald Knob?
I was there last week.
Okay. I know you had an interaction with a snake handler as a kid. Is that the most terrified you've ever been?
Say that again. I'm sorry, Ty.
No, it's okay. Randy, I know you had an interaction with a snake charmer as a kid or a snake handler. Is that the most terrified you've ever been? Because it would be mine. I'm with you, man.
So. I think so.
Okay.
I mean, it was at a tribal dance in Oklahoma, and they were handling snakes. An idiot came over and got within my nose length of a snake, and I'm sure it crapped in my pants.
Oh, man.
Yes.
How many surgeries have you had?
Off the record or on the record?
On the record, because it's going in the podcast.
Probably 40 plus.
Jeez Louise. What do you remember about sitting next to Robin Roberts at the Final Four 25 years ago?
Oh, my gosh. Man, you've done your homework on me. Chris Berman, Tom, she was the nicest person I think I've ever met to be at her level. We talked and giggled like we were teenagers. And I didn't know her. Did not know her. She didn't know me. She does now. Well, she's forgotten about me since then. But, I missed her. My wife, you love stories, don't you? My wife, for my 60th birthday, took me to New York City. And on our final day, final morning, I'd go to a Yankee game. Obviously, that was the reason why we went. And A.J. Burnett, who was pitching for the New York Yankees, he got us his seats, family seats. We sat in his family seats that day. And I had broadcast CAC basketball when Allen was a basketball player for the Mustangs. But that morning, Kerry is determined that we would go over on the set of Good Morning America. And we are there on the set. I didn't get to see Robin, but we actually got on TV, and I'm holding the sign, my 3 words, it's my birthday. So I got on Good Morning America, and a lot of folks saw it. I was surprised by that, that knew me. And so I was a celebrity for about 13 seconds that day.
You've got some great stories.
But I didn't get to say Robin. But she is such a great, she is so cool. I was so thankful and grateful when she beat cancer and was a cancer survivor, because she is such a quality person.
That's unbelievable. Randy, high school or college football?
College.
Okay. 60 straight hours on-air broadcasting is the world record. Could you beat that?
I think so.
Think so? Would you?
As long as I've got somebody with me, where obviously if I need to go to the restroom, I'm hoping that it wouldn't be just me, or they better provide me with some kind of can. But yeah, I think I could.
What's your favorite old Western?
Ooh. Boy, I like McClintock. Just about anything with John Wayne. I love John Wayne.
It's hard to beat.
Hard to beat.
You're Cherokee Indian. How many people outside of your close personal circle do you think know that?
I doubt very many, because I sure don't look like one.
All right, Randy, last question before we let you go. You can take as long as you want. And again, Randy Rainwater, 103.7 The Buzz, Season 1, Episode 12 of Trusting the Process. This has been an awesome interview. You've been at 103.7 over 30 years. And being 30 years in any industry, that's a long time, and especially today's society. Do you have anything else that you want to accomplish in sports media? What's the next goal, or are you content to retire soon in the next couple of years?
It's funny you asked that, because Carrie's always said she'll roll me up to the microphone. She knows I would probably drive her totally insane if I were to retire. I've said this before. I want that feeling or knowledge that I can no longer multitask. I don't have the presence of mind to where I can just instantly or close to instantly be able to react and so forth. I don't want somebody to have to tell me your time's up. This is back to that day I met with Carrie in the parking lot for an hour after speaking to the Rotary Club on Harding campus that day. When I'm asked to speak at those type of fairs, usually I'll spend about 20 minutes, 15 minutes, my history, kind of the same things I've said to you today, going through my career, because everybody wants to know how you got started. And the history of the station, the irony of losing Rush Limbaugh, and the actual true birth of Drive Time Sports, and so forth. And then I leave time for Q&A. Well, a guy holds up his hand, and I said, "Yes, sir." He stands up and he says, "What kind of goals do you have set for yourself?" And I'm thinking, holy smokes, I've never thought of it that way. I said, "Give me a second. Okay, here's my goals. I've been on the air now for 20 years, and that's 20 years consecutively in Little Rock. That puts me into, or maybe I take that back. Maybe I wasn't on 20 years at that time. Anyway, but I said I want to be on the air over 20 years consecutively, and that would put me probably in the same group of a Jim Elder, a Brother Hal. I'm not sure even Craig O'Neill could say that. On a handful of names that are legends in our business, I want to be able to say that I've been on the air consecutively in Little Rock for 20 years. And then if I were asked that again later on, I would have said, well, I want to be on the air now for 30 years. Well, I've accomplished that. So what would be your next goal? I don't know that I have one, Tye, that I can put definitively.
Pen to paper.
I am a very, very appreciative of our audience. We've had outstanding ratings, even back when we were on the AM. And as you well know, in our business, ratings keeps you employed. And if you don't have ratings, they can't sell you. And if they don't have any revenue, they're not going to be able to pay you. So see you later. So I guess continuing to survive would be probably at the top of the ladder. But I've been the voice of Arkansas State basketball and football. I've been the voice of the UALR Trojans. At one time, I would have wanted to be the voice of the Arkansas Razorbacks because no one's ever done all three programs, to my knowledge. Well, no one has. And so that goal is no longer, that's not feasible. So from just to do, okay, let's say I want to get on media row for the Super Bowl. To me, that's not that big of a deal. I mean, if I'm not going to cover the game, in most cases, whoa. That me?
Yeah, you're good, though. No worries.
But that would be, now from a bucket list standpoint, I mean, I'd love to go to a Super Bowl. I'd love to go to a World Series. I'd like to go to a game at Fenway Park. But that's separate from broadcasting. So I guess the easiest way to say it without, again, being long-winded is survive. And Reed will be going to the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, and we hope that's for at least 4 years. He wants to go into physical therapy, which probably means more than 4 years. So probably, Tye, unless I get booted off the air by the station, I've got at least, I'm thinking 6 more years before I can think about retiring, which doesn't make me 75, and I guess that might be a good age to finally say enough's enough.
To hang up the headset. Okay. I like Randy how you're thinking about even in all this you're thinking about your stepson, because I've joked with my dad. My dad's high 50s, and we're talking about retirement because he's getting in that age where he's going to probably retire in about 9 or so years, and it comes back to us having to pay college. Well, my youngest stepsister, her senior year is currently now, and so after this year, he'll be done with paying collegiate bills, and he is ever so happy about that, Randy.
Well, we thought Reed, he's pretty good at baseball, and we thought he was going to be on some type of athletic scholarship, and he had several offers. And he came in one night to inform us of his decision, and he said, I'm taking 15 hours in the fall college prep courses. I'm taking 15 hours this spring. I'm going to take 15 hours in the summer so that when I enroll at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, I'll be a junior.
Jeez.
And
you got a hard worker.
We kept saying, what about baseball? Because all these coaches have told you, you can continue your education and still play ball. And you can get an excellent degree from all these different places in your chosen field. And he said, no, I'm wanting to concentrate totally on baseball. I mean, on education. And after he left the room, Kerry and I turned to each other and said, okay, you got to practice what you preach. We've been preaching education, education, education for 12 years of this kid's life, and how he comes in and tells us he wants to step it up in regards to his education. And we're saying, but you can still play ball, Reed. But we can't play the game for him. So he's made his decision, and that's fine. We can live with it, and we'll support him. But I got a feeling that he first wanted to be a vet. Well, this is a kid that doesn't like to do anything concerning a dog, clean anything up or otherwise, and he hates needles. So I don't think he'd be very good at being a vet. But he says he wants to be a physical therapist, and more power to him.
Randy, this has been phenomenal. Really appreciate your time. Season 1, Episode 13, Randy Rainwater here. Randy, this, again, I really appreciate you spending some time with us on Trusting the Process.
I loved it, Tye. Thank you. I must tell you, I am as impressed with anyone that I've done this with because of your thorough research of my life. I mean, for those probably didn't even know I lived in Rose City and that I was Cherokee and some other things you brought out. So I want to applaud you on your preparation and your presentation. And anytime I can assist you, you know how to get a hold of me.
Thanks, buddy. I make sure when I do these, and I've talked with Trey and Richard and John and others about this, I got about 30, 40 questions prep, and then questions spring off the answers that you give. So I want to make sure that it's worth your time. And I think for our audience, it's definitely been worth it today, especially with some of the great stories you told, buddy.
Oh, I got plenty of them. You know, there was one story I didn't tell, talking about doing it for Arkansas State. We're down in McAllen, Texas. And this is back when it took 2 mules and Sister Sarah to carry the equipment about. And I had 2 huge cases that I had to marry together to get the broadcast on. I had to use 2 different phone lines and marry them together. And we're standing there getting our luggage. And Bob Campbell was the young man's name. He was a hotshot freshman for Arkansas State. And I call it a cascade on the luggage return. Here comes one of those huge cases, about 90 miles an hour, hits the lip and comes flying out. It misses Bob's foot by about an inch. I just almost crapped my pants thinking the highly regarded freshman with a broken foot, but how it happened was not on the basketball court, but because of the stupid play-by-play man's broadcast equipment coming down this cascade. But, so yeah, you run into a lot of stories. I mean, there's all kinds of stories you can tell. But, again, I appreciate what you've done today.
We'll end it there. Really appreciate the Arnold team at Weichert Realtors in Harrison being a part of this podcast. For Randy Rainwater, I'm Tye Richardson. Whatever you may be doing in work life, make sure you're always trusting the process.
Long range! Are you kidding me? He's got his J back, folks, and the eye of the tiger.